The hall was alive tonight, dripping in gold firelight, swaying with music, bursting at the seams with wolves dressed in silk and status. The Moonstone Pack's annual harvest festival was the grandest celebration in the Northern Territories. And tonight, it looked every bit like a dream spun from the moon goddess herself. But not for Elena. No. For Elena, it wasn't a dream. It was a punishment wrapped in glitter and laughter. The festival might have lit up every corner of the Great Hall, but she was still stuck in the shadows, kneeling on stone, scrubbing soot off hearths like her life depended on it. Maybe it did. Her hands, raw, cracked, trembling from hours of scalding water, moved in automatic rhythm over the worn stone. They didn't care that the floor would be covered in mud and spilled wine again by morning. Nobody cared. Not about the hearth, not about the mess, and definitely not about her. They never looked directly at her. Not really. She could be invisible or made of smoke, and the effect would have been the same. Maybe that's what being Omega truly meant. Not being hated, just unseen. Forgotten. 6 years ago, Elena had walked into her first shift ceremony with trembling hope in her heart and walked out with nothing but silence clinging to her skin. She hadn't shifted. No fur, no wolf, just nothing. Her birth pack said she was broken, cursed, an embarrassment too shameful to keep, and when she was cast out, she was lucky the Moonstone Pack took her in. Lucky. They said that word like a knife wrapped in velvet. Now at 24, she was still Omega, still shiftless, still broken, still lucky. Somewhere above her, laughter burst out loud and wild. Elena didn't look up. She didn't need to. She could imagine it all perfectly. Nobles in silver and emerald, toasting goblets, boasting about land and lineage. Alphas locking gazes with betas across the hall. Future mates being quietly arranged behind heavy curtains. Elena stayed low. She wasn't allowed anywhere near the dancing. The servants had rules, tight rules. Clean, move, vanish, smile if spoken to. Never forget your place. She wrung out her cloth, the ache in her wrist sharp, her back screaming. 2 more hours, she whispered to herself. Just 2 more, then this show is over. But something pulled at her attention. A quiet thread in the noise, a stillness that didn't belong. Her gaze drifted up, just for a second, and there, half shielded by the eastern archway, stood Prince Adrian. He was alone. Everyone else, every noble, every heir, every blood-bound warrior was surrounded, engulfed, orbiting each other in constant motion. But Adrian... He stood as still as a statue, one hand resting lightly against the stone wall beside him. Not leaning, not slouched, just anchored, like he needed the wall to prove he was still part of the room, part of the world. Elena blinked. Her hand dropped, cloth forgotten. No one stood near him. Not really. A few wolves passed by. Some glanced in his direction, but none stopped. None spoke. And when he turned his head, just slightly, toward a pair of approaching footsteps, a flicker of hope sparked across his face. Lord Brennan. Elena recognized him. Young, ambitious, always smiling when the Alpha King was watching. He walked straight toward Adrian. The prince turned fully now, his hand lifting a fraction. A breath away from greeting. Then Brennan veered at the last second, without pause, without hesitation. He turned away from the prince like Adrian was a piece of furniture he'd misjudged the location of, and greeted the wolf 3 feet to Adrian's left instead. Adrian's hand hovered in the air. Then slowly, it dropped. That flicker of hope? Gone. Like it had never dared to exist in the first place. Elena's chest tightened. Her throat burned. She knew that feeling. Gods, she knew it too well. That quiet humiliation. That forced swallow of disappointment. That moment you pretend not to notice what just happened, even though your entire soul had reached out for it. Whispers flooded her memory. Blind since birth. Some old curse from a rival pack. Moon Goddess struck him for something his ancestors did. A burden? Not a prince. That's what they said. That's what they believed. And even though he was the Alpha King's only son, the heir to the strongest pack in the north, Adrian was treated like a ghost in his own damn home. She watched him closely now, the way he stood so still, the way he kept his hands close to his sides unless he needed to move, the way his face stayed blank, unreadable, like he was trying not to take up too much space. He didn't want to be a problem. He didn't want to be in the way. He just wanted to exist without being reminded he didn't belong. Elena swallowed hard. Her pulse pounded in her ears. Every part of her screamed, "Stay low, keep scrubbing, don't get involved, he's a prince, you're nothing." But she didn't move, because in Adrian's stillness she saw herself, in his silence. She saw every word no one had ever spoken to her, and without fully understanding why, her legs moved. She stood, left her bucket behind, moved through the hall like she'd been swallowed by the music and motion, but wasn't part of it. The wolves around her didn't see her. They never did. She was just the Omega with ash on her hands and scars on her palms. It was the first time invisibility felt like a blessing. She slipped between noblewomen in jeweled gowns, past warriors locked in loud contests of strength, past laughing children daring each other to sneak pastries. Until she reached the edge of the archway. Adrian didn't sense her. Too much noise. Too many voices. Too much of everything. He stood in that same careful position, back straight, hand gently brushing the wall. So she did something bold. She scraped the sole of her worn shoe against the stone floor, sharp, deliberate, unmistakable. Adrian's head snapped toward her, confusion furrowing his brow. "Hello?" he said aloud. His voice was quiet, gentle, but it carried that same thread she knew too well, the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, someone had seen him. Elena didn't answer with words. She raised her hand to the stone pillar beside her and tapped. 3 short, 2 long, 1 short, the pattern her grandmother had taught her when she was young. The old tongue, a tactile language used before modern times, before wolves had forgotten how to truly listen. Adrian froze. Then, slowly, his hand reached forward, brushing the same pillar. He tapped back. 3 short, 2 long, 1 short, then a final single tap. A question. "Who are you?" Her fingers trembled. But she tapped into his open palm. "My name is Elena." The change in him was instant. That blank mask shattered, and beneath it was raw hope. Startling, painful, beautiful. His fingers tapped fast now, urgent. "You know the old tongue? The tactile speech? No one here knows it. They just yell, as if being louder will help me see." Elena pressed her palm to his. "I noticed. It's shameful." A sound escaped him, a breath that wanted to be a laugh. His fingers moved again, smoother this time. "They think I'm helpless. Broken. A burden." She answered without pause. "You're not broken. They're just too lazy to understand you." This time he laughed. Really laughed. Then, "What's your name? Your rank?" Elena hesitated. The moment stretched, but she didn't lie. "Elena. Omega. I work in the kitchens." She braced for it, the shift in his face. The polite withdrawal, the silent disappointment. But it never came. He just tilted his head, smiling softly. "Omega. Huh. Then they overlook you too." Elena swallowed. "Every day." Adrian's fingers stilled. Then he tapped, slow and certain, Then we're the same, Royal and Omega, both invisible. The moment lingered, a quiet, perfect recognition. Then, "You there, Omega!" The voice cracked through the air like a whip. Elena jolted, stepping back as Lady Morgana strode toward them, her eyes like daggers. "What do you think you're doing, accosting the prince?" Adrian's hands moved quickly. He was trying to sign, but Morgana didn't even glance at him. "Elena, was it?" Morgana sneered. "I suggest you remember your place." Rough hands gripped Elena's arm. She didn't resist. She just looked back. And Adrian, he was still standing there, still reaching toward where she'd been. But this time, when their eyes met, he didn't look alone. Not anymore. The morning air in the palace kitchens was thick with the scent of wood smoke, wet stone, and rising bread, but even that warmth couldn't settle the dread curling tight in Elena's stomach. She didn't sleep. Not really. How could she? Her hands still remembered the feel of his, the way Adrian's fingers had trembled when she tapped her name into his palm, the way his whole body seemed to exhale, like she'd pulled him back from some lonely edge. She hadn't meant for it to happen, hadn't planned to cross the line between servant and royal. But she saw him, truly saw him. And he looked back. Now, standing in the cold morning glow, she faced Maven, the head cook who'd raised more Omegas than most packs cared to admit. Maven's eyes, sharp as flint, landed on her the second she stepped through the cellar door. "You stirred the wrong pot, girl," Maven said, wiping her hands on a flour-dusted apron. "Lady Morgana reported you, said you were lingering too close to the prince." Elena's heart knocked once, hard. "She say what I did?" Elena asked, voice quiet. "She didn't need to," Maven muttered. "It doesn't matter what you did. It's what they think you might do. You're Omega. He's heir. That's all the proof they'll ever need." "I wasn't," Elena started, but her throat closed around the words. Maven waved a hand. "Don't explain. I know what you were doing. You were seeing someone no one else bothers to. You have a soft heart, Elena. That'll get you chewed alive in this place." Elena turned to scrub down the stone counters, pretending her hands weren't shaking, but her mind wasn't here. It was back in the great hall. Back with the way Adrian had leaned toward her touch like it was the first real thing he'd felt in years. "This is impossible," she whispered under her breath. "He's a prince." But another voice, quieter, older, echoed through her. He was so alone, so desperate to be seen. So were you. And suddenly the impossibility of it all didn't feel like enough of a reason to stay away. 2 days passed. She was quiet, careful, didn't speak unless spoken to, kept her eyes down. But her ears, gods, her ears were trained to the hallway outside the prince's quarters. Every time a guard passed, every time a servant whispered, but Adrian didn't send for her. And then, just after midday on the 3rd day, Maven tossed a rag at her chest with a grim look. "You're being sent to clean the royal library. Top shelves and dusting, alone." Elena didn't ask why. She just nodded, grabbed her tools, and went. The library was a forgotten cathedral of leather-bound spines and dust motes caught in lazy sunbeams. The scent of aged parchment and wax hung thick in the air. It was quiet. Sacred. The kind of silence that pressed against your ears. And then, movement. A figure, just ahead, near the far wall. Elena froze. Adrian. He stood facing a shelf, his fingers gliding across the embossed titles with reverence, like they were living things. He didn't turn, but his head tilted, just enough. "Elena?" he asked softly. His voice wasn't surprised. It was hopeful. She stepped closer, quiet, careful, then reached out, brushed her fingertips across the shelf in front of him. Tap, tap, tap. 2 long, 1 short. Confirmation. He turned fully toward her. His lips parted in a half-smile that nearly broke her. "I hoped you'd come," he said. "I've been here every day, just in case." Elena tapped back on his palm, gentle. "You wanted to see me again?" Adrian's fingers moved against hers. "You're the only one who speaks to me. Not at me, not around me, just to me." She sat beside him on the low window bench, the sunlight spilling over them like blessing or warning. She couldn't tell. He didn't speak for a long moment, just breathed. "They treat me like I'm made of glass," he said finally. "Or like I'm not even here, like I died at birth and this is just the shadow left behind." Elena didn't answer. She didn't need to. He turned his palm up, waited. She tapped slowly, with honesty. "They said I was defective, that I didn't shift because I was cursed. My own pack threw me out." She didn't look at him when she tapped the last part. "They told me I wasn't worth keeping." Adrian's fingers closed around hers, tight, warm, steady. They didn't need more words just then. Some truths live too deep for speech. After a moment, Adrian released her hand and stood. "Describe it to me," he said. Elena blinked. "The library?" "Not what it looks like," he said. "What it feels like. Tell me what I'm missing." She paused, then rose to stand beside him. "The floor creaks with age," she said. "The kind that makes your bones feel like they belong here. The books smell like firewood and secrets. The air's warm, but the corners are always a little cold, like even sunlight can't reach everything." Adrian smiled. "You see the world differently." Elena glanced at him. "Maybe that's what happens when no one sees you, Ben. You learn to see everything else." He offered her his arm, not like she was a servant, like she was a guide. "I want to show you something," he said. They moved through servant tunnels, narrow stairwells, halls even the guards rarely used. Adrian navigated without hesitation. Memorized every curve, every step. "You know this place better than anyone," Elena whispered. "I had to," he said. "When you can't see, you learn to map the world by memory, by breath, by instinct." Their fingers brushed once, accidentally. Neither pulled away. The air between them changed. Electric, cautious, charged. In a palace where neither had ever been wanted, they had found something that felt dangerous and true. But then, footsteps, boots, clanking armor, close. "Guards," Adrian said under his breath. Elena grabbed his arm and pulled him into a side alcove, shoving them into the narrow space behind a hanging tapestry. They stood pressed together, barely breathing. Her heart thundered against her ribs. She could feel his chest rising and falling, slow, controlled, like he'd trained himself never to panic. The guards passed, oblivious. Silence returned, thick and intimate. Elena looked up at him, her face only inches from his. She could see the small scar near his temple, the way his lashes brushed his cheek when he blinked. "I shouldn't keep putting you at risk," he whispered. "If they find you with me again." "I'm already at risk just for being born Omega," she said. "This is worth it." Adrian's breath hitched, and something in his face softened, like her words cracked a wall he didn't know he'd built. They stepped apart, but not far. He turned his palm to her, slowly. "Come back tomorrow, please?" Her throat closed. She should say no, should run now and never return. He was heir to a kingdom. She was kitchen dust. But she tapped back. "Tomorrow. same time. She slipped away, vanishing down the hall before the next patrol. But she didn't see what stood behind her. Lady Morgana, half shrouded in the shadows of the corridor, watching, listening, her lips tight, her eyes calculating. She'd seen everything, and she'd already decided what must be done. But inside the library, Prince Adrian stood still for a long time. His hand lifted slightly, hovering where hers had been, and for the first time in years, he was smiling. By the time Maven found her again, the morning air had a weight to it, not heavy, not sharp, just final. Elena was on her knees in the outer courtyard, scrubbing blood from stone tiles left behind from a training session. Warriors didn't clean up after themselves. That was for the unseen, the untouchable. Her fingers stung. Her knees ached. She barely looked up when Maven approached. "You're summoned," the older woman said, tone clipped. "Now, throne room." Elena froze. Every nerve in her body lit up at once. "Why?" Maven didn't answer. She just pressed a folded linen into Elena's hands, cleaner than anything Elena owned. "Wear this," she said. "Don't ask questions." There were no explanations, no reassurances, just silence and the pounding of Elena's pulse as she stood and scrubbed her hands raw in the basin outside the kitchens. The throne room was packed when she arrived, thick with nobles in jewel-toned cloaks and servants tucked into corners like shadows. Elena stayed back, near a pillar, behind a gilded suit of ceremonial armor. If she was lucky, no one would notice her. But her eyes found Adrian immediately. He stood beside the throne, shoulders straight but tight with tension. His fingers twitched at his sides, brushing the inside of his sleeve. Elena recognized the small tell now, nervous energy masked by stillness. A man who'd learned to control his body because the world had told him it was untrustworthy. Alpha King Magnus rose from the throne. His voice boomed across the chamber, practiced and absolute. "We gather today to secure our future." Elena stiffened. This pack must stand strong, united with the Crimson Veil Pack, whose resources and warriors will reinforce our borders before winter. To that end, I announce the mating of my son, Prince Adrian, to Lady Seraphina of Crimson Veil. The breath left Elena's lungs in one brutal rush. A murmur rippled through the room, a wave of approval from nobles who'd already known, from betas who would gain by proximity, from wolves who had no idea what that announcement cost the boy standing beside the throne. Adrian didn't move, didn't speak, but Elena watched his knuckles turn white as his hands clenched behind his back. Magnus continued. "Lady Seraphina brings leadership, wisdom, and clarity of vision." The emphasis on vision was deliberate, cruel. Elena didn't look around to see who was smiling. She didn't have to. The chamber doors opened. Lady Seraphina entered like the stage was built for her alone. Tall, graceful, wrapped in deep red silk that clung to her frame like spilled blood. Her smile was perfect. Her hair, perfect. Every step measured, calculated. She stopped before Adrian and offered her hand. Adrian hesitated. Just a flicker. A heartbeat. Then carefully he accepted the gesture. His fingers closed over hers, but he did not bow, did not smile. His lips barely moved when he murmured, "Lady Seraphina." She turned to the crowd, smiling with pride. But her gaze swept the room like a predator looking for weakness. And then it landed on Elena. Their eyes locked. And Seraphina smiled wider, like she'd already won. Elena didn't remember leaving the throne room. Her body walked itself back toward the kitchens, her mind still trapped in the space where Adrian had stood silent, where his shoulders hadn't relaxed once, where his father had spoken about him instead of to him. Maven caught her again in the pantry, halfway through refolding linen napkins with trembling hands. I saw your face, Maven said gently. Elena's throat tightened. I didn't mean to, child, Maven cut in, voice low. I've seen the way you look at him, and I've seen the way he turns toward your footsteps, like they're the only thing real. I know it's impossible, Elena said, barely above a whisper. I know. Maven leaned against the stone wall, arms crossed. Love doesn't check the rules before it chooses who to break for. Elena couldn't breathe past the ache in her chest. He's going to be mated. And yet he looked like a prisoner waiting for a sentence, Maven said. Not a man stepping toward joy. Night fell hard. Elena kept to the servant corridors, trying to convince herself to forget everything she'd felt, everything she'd seen. She was almost to her quarters when she heard it. Footsteps behind her, familiar, measured, light. Adrian? She breathed, turning. He was there. No guards, no attendants, just him, wrapped in twilight and tension. Elena, he said, and her name in his voice broke something inside her. She moved quickly, pulling him into an empty chamber. They shut the door behind them with a soft click. She didn't speak, just reached for his palm. Her fingers tapped fast, urgent. Did you agree to this mating? Adrian's face twisted. Then his hands exploded in motion, tapping against her skin with fury. I didn't agree. He decided. He always decides. No one asks me what I want, not ever. Her chest ached as she responded. You don't want her. He stilled. Then, so softly she almost missed it, he signed, I want someone who sees me, really sees me. Like you do. He reached out then, not for her hand, but for her face. His fingers brushed her cheekbone, trembling. She closed her eyes, let him map the shape of her jaw, the edge of her lips. Not possessive, not hungry, just real. His thumb caught on the corner of her mouth. Elena, he whispered. She opened her eyes. The air between them pulsed. This is wrong, her mind whispered. This is dangerous. But her heart was louder. This is true. She didn't pull away. Outside, footsteps echoed down the corridor. Guards. They looked at each other, then moved, fast, pressing into the dark alcove behind the old armor stand. They were close again, too close. Her breath tangled with his. Her heart pounded so loud she swore he could hear it. The guards passed, didn't stop. Silence returned. Neither of them moved. I can't do this, Adrian whispered finally, voice cracking. But I can't not do this either. She tapped on his chest, slow, certain. See you. He tilted his head, lips parted, like she'd said something holy. Then, crash! The door slammed open. Light, shouting, iron grips on her arms. Elena! The guards seized her. Adrian shouted, reaching for her. She was found in restricted areas, Your Highness. Don't worry, we'll handle it. They didn't wait for Adrian's protest. They didn't listen to his voice. They just dragged Elena out into the corridor like she was nothing but ash on their boots. But before they turned the corner, she looked back. Adrian was standing in the middle of the room, alone, eyes wild, hands half lifted in protest. No one would ever bother to learn how to read, and yet he wasn't empty. He was burning. The cell was small, damp. Not meant for long stays, just long enough to remind you who held the power. Elena didn't speak, didn't beg. She sat on the cold floor with her arms wrapped around her knees, her back against the stone. The scent of old blood clung to the walls. Iron bars, no windows, The guards hadn't said a word when they tossed her in. No explanation. No sentence. Just silence. But she already knew the answer. She wasn't being punished for trespassing. She was being punished for being seen, for daring to touch the untouchable, to exist in the orbit of someone she was never meant to speak to. The prince, Adrian. His name was a bruise in her chest now, a memory she wanted to protect, even if they ripped everything else from her. She didn't know how much time passed. Hours? Days? It all blurred into the same shade of gray. Then, boots, louder than before. The door creaked open, and a guard stepped in, his face unreadable. "You're being summoned." Elena blinked. Summoned? Where? He didn't answer. The throne room was colder this time, not by temperature, by atmosphere. Every gaze that landed on her was sharp, suspicious, waiting for her to slip. Adrian stood again at his father's side, lips drawn tight, jaw locked. His fingers twitched against his sleeve. He hadn't slept. She could tell by the lines under his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. But he stood tall, every inch of him trying not to show the storm beneath the surface. Alpha King Magnus gestured toward Elena without even looking at her. "My son," he began, "has made it clear that he requires more direct assistance in preparation for the upcoming treaty conference. As such, you have been reassigned." Elena's stomach dropped. "You will serve as his personal attendant," Magnus said, effective immediately. The silence that followed was loud, and Serafina, standing near the far pillar, smiled like the trap had been perfectly set. Elena didn't speak. She couldn't. This wasn't a promotion. It wasn't an opportunity. It was a warning. They were putting her close to Adrian not because they trusted her, but because now every misstep he made, every imperfection, every weakness, would be her fault. She glanced at him, just briefly. Adrian's mouth parted as if he wanted to speak, but he said nothing. Because here, words were never enough. They gave her no time to prepare, no chance to wash, to rest, to breathe. By dawn, she stood outside Adrian's chambers, unsure if she should knock. But before she could decide, the door opened from the inside. Adrian stood there, dressed but rumpled, barefoot, his head tilted slightly, his face unreadable, but his hand reached out, fingers grazing the doorframe. "Elena," he said quietly. She stepped inside. The room was warm, soft carpet, books stacked in corners, the scent of cedar and ink. She hadn't realized how lived in his space would feel. Adrian shut the door behind her, then turned his palm up, inviting her hand. She tapped, slowly. "I didn't ask for this assignment." He smiled, small and tired. "Neither did I." They moved to the sitting area away from the main hall. She knelt beside his chair, instinctively lowering herself before correcting and rising back up. "Don't do that," he said, voice soft but firm. "What?" "Don't shrink. Not in here." She nodded. He sat. She stood. The space between them felt both too much and not enough. "I can help with your routine," she offered. "Meals, clothing, navigation, but you don't need a nursemaid, Adrian." His head tilted. "What do you think I need?" She swallowed. "Someone who asks what you want instead of assuming they know." He went still, then smiled, really smiled. "You're the first person to ever ask me that." Their days began to fall into rhythm. Elena learned that Adrian woke before dawn, not out of habit, but necessity. He couldn't risk appearing late, disheveled, uncertain. Perfection was expected. Anything less was weakness. She helped where he asked, not where she assumed. And slowly, quietly, he began to trust her. He showed her how he organized his clothes, by texture, his documents, by shape, his routine, by memory. She watched, learned, adapted. He wasn't helpless. He was meticulous, brilliant, capable in ways the world refused to acknowledge. And that made her angrier than she expected. The first test came during the courtship breakfast. Serafina arrived with the confidence of someone who believed the world owed her everything. She greeted Adrian loudly, slowly, her tone saccharine and condescending. "Good morning, Prince Adrian," she said, drawing out each syllable. "You're looking well." Elena stood nearby, silent but alert. Serafina moved Adrian's cup, then his plate. Then, when he reached for his fork, she nudged it an inch to the left. He missed. Her smile widened. Adrian's hand hesitated. His face didn't change, but Elena saw the tension creep into his shoulders. Elena tapped once against the back of the chair, barely audible. Adrian shifted, adjusted, found the fork. Serafina's smile faltered. Later, when they were alone, Adrian sat at the edge of his bed, hands loose in his lap. "She does it on purpose," he said. "Moves things. To make me look incompetent." Elena knelt before him, not to serve, but to meet his gaze. "I saw," she whispered. "And I believe you." His expression broke, just for a heartbeat. Then his hands found hers. "Thank you." That night they sat by the hearth, reviewing treaty notes. Adrian listened while she read. He analyzed every clause, every subtle change in language. His mind worked faster than most of the council. "You should be at those meetings," Elena said. He shook his head. "My father says I miss too much. Can't read expressions. Can't catch lies. You hear more than anyone else does. You listen when no one else is even paying attention." He turned toward her, and slowly, without thinking, reached out and tucked a stray curl behind her ear. She stilled. So did he. Their eyes met. The air pulled tight. But before anything more could happen, a knock at the door. Too hard. Too sharp. Elena rose, opened it. Serafina stood there alone. Her smile was poison. "Evening," she said. "Just checking that everything is going smoothly." Elena stepped aside. "I was just leaving." Serafina didn't move. Her gaze pinned Elena like prey. A word. Outside. They stepped into the corridor. Then Serafina leaned in, voice low and cold. "Let me be clear, Omega. I don't care what twisted fantasy you've built in your head. Adrian is mine. The mating is happening. You are nothing." Elena didn't answer, so Serafina smiled wider. "You know what happens to Omegas who forget their place? They vanish. Tragic accidents. Unclaimed bodies in the woods." She brushed past Elena without waiting for a response. Elena stood there for a long time, chest tight, fury burning low in her gut. She'd faced rejection before, hatred, loneliness, but this was new. This was war. 2 weeks passed, not in peace, not in silence, in tension. Every day Elena woke with the feeling that something was about to break. She and Adrian had found a rhythm. He trusted her now, more than anyone. She became his shadow, his voice when he needed it, his eyes when the world refused to see him. Their conversations grew longer, softer, deeper. And still, the clock ticked. The mating ceremony was just 2 weeks away. Serafina had started calling herself the future Luna in front of the guards. The nobles parroted it. Even the cooks whispered it over boiling pots. But not Adrian, not Elena. They never spoke about the ceremony, never spoke about the countdown to his cage, but it hung between them like a third heartbeat, always pulsing, always there. Then the gift arrived. It came wrapped in ivory silk, tied with a ribbon the color of dried blood, delivered to Adrian's chambers at breakfast with a handwritten note and a bowing servant who left too quickly. From Lady Serafina. "A surprise," the card read. For your ears, your heart, your hands, I hope you enjoy exploring every inch of this gift. Some things are only found if you feel deeply enough. Adrian ran his fingers over the box. Smooth, carved, ornate. Elena stood frozen. Music box. That's what it looked like. Beautiful, intricate, a collector's piece. But something felt wrong. He reached to open it. Elena moved fast. Wait! Her voice was too sharp, too sudden. He froze, fingers hovering just over the latch. She took the box from his hands, turned it slowly, listened. A soft melody played, haunting, gentle, notes that stirred memory. But inside the mechanism, something clicked. Out of time, out of rhythm. She narrowed her eyes. Then she felt it. A seam. Too perfect. She twisted the base. Click. A hidden compartment opened. Inside, thin silver needles, no thicker than hair, lined up like teeth, coated in something dark, something oily, poison. Don't touch it, she said, stepping back like it might bite. Adrian's face paled. What is it? She didn't answer right away. She couldn't, because she was staring at the truth, the beautiful music, the elegant wrapping, the card, with its careful choice of words. I hope you enjoy exploring every inch of this gift. It was a trap, made specifically for him, for his blindness, for his hands, so that when he ran his fingers over the carvings, just like he always did, he'd prick himself. A tragic accident. The blind prince dead by his own curiosity. She turned to him, her voice low, deadly steady. She tried to kill you. They sat in silence for a long time. The box sat between them on the table, open like a wound. Adrian didn't speak. His hands rested in his lap. Still. Too still. She wants the title, Elena said eventually. Not you, just the throne. Adrian didn't move. I thought maybe she just didn't care, that this was political. But this is murder. Finally, Adrian exhaled. I knew she didn't love me. I knew she didn't see me. But I didn't think, he swallowed. Not like this. Elena sat beside him, quiet, but close. Their shoulders touched. He leaned into it. I've spent my whole life being tolerated, he said. Dismissed. Managed. Now I'm disposable. You're not, she said fiercely. He turned his head toward her voice. Elena, what do we do? That night, they went to the palace healer, Cordelia, an older wolf with soft hands and sharp instincts. She examined the needles under lamplight, scraped a bit of the substance off the tips, heated it over flame. Her face turned grave. Nightshade, she whispered. A rare strain, concentrated, lethal. Adrian stood behind Elena, silent, face unreadable. Cordelia set the needle down with reverence. This would have killed him in hours. There would have been no saving him. Elena offered her the card. The healer read it, twice. The message was veiled but deliberate. It was practically a confession. Cordelia exhaled. I'll document it, log the poison. But you'll need more than this. If you want the council to believe you, if you want to accuse a noble of future Luna... Adrian stepped forward. We don't want power. Cordelia looked up. Then what do you want? Elena answered for them both. Justice. But justice, in the palace, moved slower than poison. When they brought the evidence to Magnus the next day, he listened. He examined the music box. He read the note. He said all the right words. This is deeply troubling, he murmured. Unacceptable. I will speak with Serafina directly. But his tone was detached, political, cold. Elena's stomach turned. Adrian stood stiff beside her. "You don't believe me," Magnus sighed. "Adrian, gifts are ceremonial. Poetic language is expected. You're letting your fears cloud your judgment." Elena stepped forward. "There are needles. With poison." Magnus turned to her, slow. "You forget your place." Adrian's fists clenched. "She found the poison," he snapped. "She saved my life. You're lucky I'm standing here." But Magnus didn't flinch. "There is no proof Serafina placed those needles herself. No direct witness. No signature. No admission. It's circumstantial." He looked at Adrian like a man trying not to look at all. "The mating will proceed, with caution. I will see that Serafina is educated about appropriate gifts." It was over. That fast. Adrian turned and walked out. Elena followed. Back in his chambers, he stood at the window, facing the open air like he might jump just to escape the walls pressing in. "I was almost murdered," he said. "And he told me to be cautious." Elena's hands trembled. "Why won't he believe me?" "Because believing you means seeing the truth," she said. "And the truth costs him everything." Adrian turned to her, eyes red, but dry. "I'm not staying." The words came out sharp, final. "We run. Before the ceremony. Before she tries again." Elena stared at him. "Run where?" His breath hitched. "I can't see the way." "You don't need to," she said. "You just need to trust me." That night, they packed quietly. Food, water, maps, bandages, the healer's notes, the poison, sealed in a jar, the music box, wrapped tight, and the card, the words that nearly ended him. Maven found Elena outside the servant tunnels, her arms loaded with supplies. "You're leaving," she said. Not a question. Elena nodded. "It's the only way." Maven looked toward the palace. "You'll be hunted." "I know." "Then take this." She pressed a coin pouch into Elena's hand. "And this?" A folded piece of parchment, a name, a village. "Your grandmother," Maven said. "If anyone can help you reach the Council of Alphas, it's her." Elena blinked hard. "Thank you." Maven touched her face gently. "Go." They slipped out through the kitchen gates just before moonrise. No howls, no alarms. Yet. But they would come. Adrian walked beside her, one hand brushing her shoulder, the other tight around his cane. He couldn't see the path, but she did. And in the dark, they ran. The air outside the palace walls tasted like freedom, sharp, cold, unpromising. But to Adrian, it was more than that. It was real. The wind moved differently without stone corridors to trap it. The ground vibrated under his boots with the pulse of an untamed world. Everything beyond the palace had a rhythm that hadn't been carved by his father's laws or Serafina's lies. Elena stood beside him, steady, silent, her eyes sweeping the dark edge of the trees ahead. Her hand brushed his once. Not a grab, not a pull, just a question. "Are you ready?" He nodded. He couldn't see the path, but she did. They moved fast through the lower hills, shadows slipping beneath the tree line, carrying nothing but what they could hold. Adrian counted each step, felt the angle of the earth change beneath his feet, listened to the way her breathing changed when danger neared, too close, too loud, too still. He never asked if she was afraid, because he already knew, and she never asked him to keep up, because she already knew he would. By the time the sun rose, they'd covered nearly 10 miles of wild terrain. Elena stopped only once, kneeling beside a cold stream to fill their flasks and check Adrian's ankle, already swelling from uneven stone. He didn't complain. "I'm fine," he muttered. "You're not," she replied. But her hands were careful, warm. She wrapped the joint tight and helped him up without a word. He didn't need pity, and she didn't give it. That was something Adrian had never had before. By the second night, the fatigue began to claw deeper. Elena found a cave, a shallow hollow tucked between jagged rocks, and pulled Adrian inside just as the rain started. It came down hard, fast, washing away their scent, their trail, and their strength. Adrian collapsed against the wall, body trembling from exhaustion. Elena knelt, started a small fire with dried moss and flint she'd stolen from the kitchens. He watched her through the flicker of flame, listened to how her breath caught, just a little, every time lightning split the sky. "You've done this before," he said. "No," she replied. "But I've been hunted before." Silence settled. Rain drummed against stone. Adrian shifted closer. "I thought the palace was a prison," he said. "But at least it had walls. This is wild." She looked at him. "You regret leaving?" "No," he said. "I just never realized how much I'd been surviving instead of living." The third day brought trouble. They were crossing an old trade path, half-eaten by roots and thyme, when Elena froze mid-step. Adrian knew that stillness now, the kind that meant danger. She dropped low, grabbed his sleeve. "Trackers," she whispered. "3 of them. Crimson Veil." He nodded once. Didn't ask how close. Didn't ask how she knew. She pulled him into the underbrush. They crouched beneath twisted briars, barely breathing. Bootsteps passed. Slow, deliberate. Voices murmured. Familiar. Seraphina's uncle, one of her favored warriors. They couldn't have gone far. Prince would slow her down. "Then we'll catch them by dusk." Elena's grip on Adrian's arm tightened. He turned his hand into hers and tapped once against her wrist. "Run?" She nodded, but not yet. They waited until the forest swallowed the voices. Then they moved again, faster now. Reckless, desperate. By twilight, Adrian was limping hard. Every step cost more. Elena found a narrow ravine with high rock walls and ducked them inside. It was safer, harder to track, but colder. Adrian collapsed beside her, chest heaving. She unpacked bread and dried meat, set it beside him. He shook his head. "Not hungry. You need your strength. I need to not slow you down. You're not." He turned toward her, toward the sound of her voice. "I'm blind," he said flatly. "I know," she snapped, finally, then softer. "And you're braver than half the warriors in your father's court." Silence stretched. Then he whispered, "You're the only one who's ever said that to me." Elena looked away. "Not everyone needs eyes to see," she said. The river came on the 4th night, wide, fast, freezing. It was the only way forward. Elena stared at the current, then at Adrian. "If we cross, we'll lose the trackers. But you'll have to trust me." He stepped toward the edge, listened to the roar, felt the mist sting his skin. "I do," he said. She took his hand and stepped into the water first. The current nearly knocked her flat. The rocks were slick, sharp beneath her boots. But she held on, one hand gripping Adrian, the other feeling for the next foothold. Step left, small rock, slippery. He followed, no hesitation. The water rose to their waists, their chests, their necks. But still, he didn't let go. 3 more steps. One strong push. He stumbled once. She caught him. They made it across just as the trackers reached the far bank. Adrian couldn't see them, but Elena did. And behind those wolves, she saw him. Captain Thorne, head of the palace guard. He met her eyes across the river and did nothing. Just stood there, watching. Then slowly, deliberately, he turned away. "Lost them?" he called. "Check downstream." Elena's breath hitched. He was letting them go. They collapsed on the other side of the river, wet, freezing, alive. Elena built a fire inside a hunter's cabin long abandoned, half swallowed by moss and earth. She pulled off Adrian's boots, checked the gash on his leg, cleaned it with steady hands, wrapped it tight. He didn't speak, not until she sat beside him, arms wrapped around herself. Then he reached out, took her hand. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. She looked at him, really looked, and the answer came like truth carved into stone. "Because the world threw both of us away," she said. "But you made me feel seen, and I won't let the world erase you." His voice broke. "You already saved me." She shook her head. "I'm just getting started." That night, in the dark cabin, beneath a roof full of holes and stars, they didn't kiss, they didn't touch. They just lay side by side on the cold wooden floor, fire between them, and listened to each other breathe. Two runaways, two rebels, two wolves who'd been invisible all their lives, finally daring to believe they were worth being found. By the 5th day, Adrian could barely walk. His fever came like a storm, slow at first, then swallowing everything. They'd made it to the edge of Wildwood, the trees darker, denser, hung with silence and fog. The air shifted here, the kind of sacred air that made wolves walk softer, speak slower. Elena gripped Adrian's waist with one arm, half carrying him as he stumbled forward. "We're close," she whispered, more for herself than him. He didn't answer. He hadn't spoken since morning. They reached the village just after dusk, if it could be called a village. 5 or 6 homes, all woven into the forest. Lanterns hung from crooked branches, no stone walls, no guards, just wolves who'd chosen silence over politics. Elena paused in front of a cottage with a blue door. Her heart pounded. This was it. She knocked 3 times. No answer. Then, a rustle. A shadow inside. The door opened, and Grandmother Mira stood there. Hair silver and wild, eyes bright and knowing, wrapped in a cloak that smelled like pine and dried herbs. "Elena," she said, not surprised, not angry, just seeing her. Elena almost collapsed. "I need your help," she breathed. "He's burning up." Mira's eyes shifted to Adrian, barely standing now, lips pale, sweat clinging to his collar. "Inside," Mira said. "Now." The cottage was warm, filled with herbs and smoke, dried flowers hanging from the ceiling. A fire roared in the hearth. Mira guided Adrian to a cot in the corner. Elena helped him down. He groaned, low and guttural, his hand clenched in hers. "Stay," he whispered. "Don't leave." "I won't." Mira pressed a cool cloth to his forehead and began working, mixing tinctures, muttering under her breath, pulling vials and jars from shelves like a woman who had prepared for this moment her entire life. Elena sat by his side, holding his hand as his fever rose higher, his body trembling with chills. His mind slipped in and out, words muttered in half-sleep. "Father, didn't see, I'm not weak." Each phrase hit like a bruise, each one carved deeper than the last. Hours passed, then dawn, then calm. Mira poured a bitter liquid between Adrian's lips, cradled his jaw, waited. The shaking stopped. The sweat cooled. The fever broke. Elena's body sagged with relief. "He'll live," Mira said, voice quiet. But he'll be weak for days. Elena pressed her forehead to Adrian's shoulder, eyes burning. Thank you. Mira sat across from her, folding her hands in her lap. Iris would have done the same. Elena looked up sharply. His mother? Mira nodded. I was her healer, her friend. Silence settled, heavy and expectant. Elena sat straighter. Then you knew. I knew everything, Mira said, including how she died. They sat at the table while Adrian slept. Elena listened, unmoving, as Mira pulled an old, leather-bound journal from a chest beneath the hearth. She opened it gently, pressed flowers, faded ink, diagrams of herbs, dosage notes, symptom logs. She wasn't sick, Mira said. That's what they told the court, postpartum complications. But I saw the truth. She slid the journal toward Elena. She was poisoned. Slowly. Over months. Elena's mouth went dry. Why? Because she stood in someone's way. The story unfolded like rot beneath beautiful soil. Iris had been queen, beloved, fierce, and kind, and pregnant with a child prophesied to change the Moonstone Pack forever. But not everyone wanted change. Not everyone wanted a blind heir. She knew, Mira whispered. She knew something was wrong. The fatigue, the black spots in her vision, the nausea. It wasn't natural. Mira had examined her, had tested teas, had traced it back to a rare root imported from the southern territories, a poison that mimicked illness in small doses. She confronted Magnus, Mira said. He didn't believe her. Elena stared at the journal. You had proof. I did, Mira said bitterly. And I was exiled for it. Silenced, threatened. By who? Mira looked up. By the same bloodline trying to finish what they started. Elena's heart dropped. Serafina, Mira nodded. Her mother was the one who delivered those restorative teas to Iris. Always smiling, always helpful. And now, her daughter returns. To finish the game. Elena couldn't speak. It was all there. The beginning, the motive, the method. A conspiracy decades in the making. And Adrian, just a boy then, born blind, motherless, had been the pawn ever since. Adrian stirred. Elena rushed to his side. His eyes opened slowly. I heard, he whispered. Mira stood nearby, silent. My mother was murdered, he said, and no one cared. His voice didn't shake. It fractured. She was strong, Mira said softly. She fought until the end. She knew the cost, and she loved you more than anything. Adrian closed his eyes, not from pain. From the unbearable weight of being right. Everyone thought I was the disappointment, he said, but they were just afraid I'd see what they tried to hide. They packed that night. The journal, the poison, the card, evidence. Mira handed Elena a sealed letter. For Elder Rowan, head of the Council of Alphas. He's fair. If anyone will listen, it's him. How far? Elena asked. 4 days on foot, east, through the glade, stay off the main road. Adrian stood, still pale, still shaking, but standing. Mira placed a hand on his cheek. I saw your mother die, she whispered. But I'm going to live long enough to watch you destroy the people who took her from you. He nodded once, jaw tight. But then, glass shattered. Flame bloomed against the far window. Down! Mira shouted. A flaming arrow struck the wall, splintering wood. Outside, howls. 6 wolves. Crimson veil. Elena! Adrian shouted. She grabbed his hand. Mira shoved the journal into her bag. Cellar tunnel! She barked. Now! I'm not leaving you. You are, Mira snapped. This isn't your fight anymore. It's theirs. Another arrow. The roof began to smoke. Mira pulled a blade from her belt. I've waited 24 years for justice, she said. Go make them listen. Adrian didn't want to move, but Elena pulled him. They vanished into the dark beneath the floorboards, down into the earth, into the roots of wildwood, while above them, a fire that had waited decades to ignite finally roared to life. They ran for 3 more days. Adrian's fever had broken, but his strength hadn't returned. Every step was slower, every mile harder, but he didn't stop, not once. Elena held the map in one hand, Adrian's in the other. She watched the sky, read the moss on trees, listened for hunters. She didn't sleep, couldn't. Every moment brought them closer to either salvation or another ambush. On the 4th day, Silver Falls came into view, larger than she remembered. High walls, watchtowers, smoke curling from chimneys. It was a city ruled by balance, power spread between packs, not hoarded by kings. They crossed the gates at dusk, exhausted and covered in travel grime. The guards hesitated, taking one look at Adrian, barefoot, bruised, and moved to block them. You can't enter the council chambers without formal— I carry evidence of treason, Elena snapped. Attempted murder of a royal heir, a conspiracy against the throne. They laughed, until Adrian lifted his chin and said, I am Prince Adrian of the Moonstone Pack. Even bruised and broken, his voice still carried the weight of bloodline. And that was enough. They were taken straight to Elder Rowan. He was older than Elena expected. Gray hair in tight braids, robes lined with the sigils of every pack he'd ever judged. His eyes didn't drift toward Adrian's cloudy gaze. He didn't dismiss Elena's muddy boots. He listened, carefully, completely. When Elena laid the journal on the table, Mira's records, the poison formulas, the pressed herbs, he didn't speak. When Adrian handed over the sealed card from Serafina, the one that invited him to feel the music box, Rowan's fingers curled around the parchment like it was glass. And when Elena produced the hidden needles, still stained dark, he leaned back and exhaled. This is— Rowan paused. Serious is too small a word. Adrian stood beside her, tall despite the limp in his step. She tried to kill me, he said softly. And no one listened. Not my father, not the court. But she'll speak again in 5 days. As my mate. As Luna. Unless you stop it. Rowan met Adrian's gaze directly. Tomorrow, he said, the Council of Alphas convenes, and you will speak. The chamber was vast, circular, open to the sky. 21 Alphas sat in stone thrones, each marked by pack banners. In the center stood the Moonstone delegation. Alpha King Magnus, Serafina, lords from the Crimson Vale, warriors, advisors. Adrian entered last, not on a platform, not with guards, on his own feet, one hand on Elena's shoulder, the other gripping the music box. When the gasps started, he ignored them. When Serafina's face tightened into a mask of performance, concerned, confused, composed, he didn't blink. He stood in the center of the ring and lifted his voice, clear and steady. I was almost murdered by my betrothed, he said. Because she wants the title, but not me. Serafina laughed, polished, controlled, sharp. My prince, I think the fever has left you confused. We all know the Omega is filling your head with— Elena stepped forward. You want to talk about confusion? She snapped. Let's talk about the gift you sent, the one laced with poison. She held up the jar, sealed with wax. Healer Cordelia, summoned from Moonstone Pack, confirmed it. Nightshade. Enough to kill in hours. And the note? Rowan asked. Elena offered it. Read aloud. Adrian didn't move. Serafina's smile twitched. That's poetry. Flirting. You can't prove— You chose your words for a blind man. Elena hissed. You invited him to explore by touch, as seen us. You knew he'd run his hands over that box. You knew he'd prick his fingers. The chamber fell silent. Elena opened the music box. The melody played. Then, click, the hidden compartment. She showed the needles. Serafina's face drained of color. Then the messenger entered. He carried more than words. He carried a truth Mira had nearly died to share. She lives, Rowan announced. Burned, wounded, but alive, and she spoke before witnesses. Rowan lifted Mira's sworn testimony. She heard Serafina's uncle give the order, kill the prince, make it look like an accident, frame the Omega. Mira had signed it in blood. Council members stirred. The Crimson Veil Alpha stood, barking objections. You're grasping at shadows! But then Serafina made her final mistake. She snapped. This is madness, she shouted. He's worthless. A black-gun prince with no future. I deserve that throne. Gasps. Silence. Serafina realized, too late, what she'd admitted. Elena didn't gloat, didn't smirk. She just stepped back and let her hand find Adrian's. That was all the council needed. Rowan stood. Lady Serafina, Lord Castor, Lord Brennan, you are hereby detained under council authority pending trial for conspiracy, attempted murder, and treason. Serafina screamed, fought, had to be dragged out, but no one looked at her. They were watching Adrian, all of them, some in shame, some in awe, and one of them, his father, with something far more human in his eyes. Later, after the chamber emptied, Magnus stood before his son. No crown, no throne, just a man who had failed his child. He lifted his hands, slowly, clumsily, and signed, I'm sorry. Adrian froze. Magnus spoke aloud as he signed. I judged you by what you couldn't do. I listened to wolves who told me you were a burden, and I forgot the one thing your mother always knew. You are everything this pack needs. Adrian's throat moved. No words came, just his hands, trembling, certain, signing back. Will you listen now? I swear it, Magnus said, from this day on. Then Magnus turned to Elena. And you, he said. The Omega who saw what none of us could. His voice cracked. You saved my son. He bowed his head. The king bowed, and the council watched it all. Elder Rowan approached last. We have discussed your future, he said. The council will oversee the trial. Crimson Veil will answer for their crimes. He turned to Elena. And you, Omega, are no longer just an Omega. Elena didn't speak. She couldn't. We would offer you a role, an official one, pack liaison, advocate for those dismissed, those forgotten. Elena looked to Adrian. She didn't need permission, just reassurance. He signed slowly. Only if you want it. You've already given me everything. I won't ask for more. She took his hand, held it tight, and spoke clearly in front of the council. I choose this. I choose us. 3 weeks later, the great hall of the Moonstone Pack was no longer a place of judgment. The light felt different now. Not because of the torches, not because of the banners, but because the wolves who once looked through Elena now looked at her with something she'd never seen before in their eyes. Respect. Not because she'd demanded it, but because she'd bled for it, stood up when no one else did, held the hand of the prince they'd all dismissed, helped him see the truth in a world that never truly saw him. Today, they would stand together, not as Omega and Prince, but as equals, as mates. Adrian stood at the altar dressed in silver-trimmed black, his head lifted, shoulders relaxed. He didn't grip the cane, didn't shift nervously. He stood as if he belonged. Because he did. The palace had changed around him. Servants had begun learning sign language. His voice was no longer filtered through his father's advisors. The treaty he helped revise had passed, with his fingerprints on every line of it. No one doubted his mind now. No one dared. And as the music began and the crowd hushed, Adrian tilted his head slightly. "I hear her," he whispered. And then she was there. Elena entered in a dress the color of ash and moonlight, simple, stunning, nothing like the Luna gowns they'd designed for Serafina. This wasn't about status. This was about survival. Her scars were uncovered, her hands bare. She walked through the crowd like every step was a promise. "I am here. I have earned this, and no one will take it from me again." At the altar, Adrian turned toward the sound of her steps. His smile, soft and steady, split the tension in the room like sunlight through frost. She took his hand, and the world went still. Elder Rowan stepped forward, not as judge, but as witness. "Before the moon goddess and this pack," he said, "we bear witness not just to a mating, but to a transformation." He gestured to Adrian. Adrian lifted both hands, signed each word, slow and sure. Captain Thorne stood beside him, translating aloud, his voice strong, clear. "I promise to see you," Adrian signed. "Even in the dark, I promise to trust you, even when I can't find the path. I promise not to be led," he continued, "but to walk beside you. Because love isn't about who carries who. It's about who keeps showing up when the world turns its face away." Elena's eyes burned, but she didn't cry. Not yet. She took his hands and spoke, her voice steady, her tone like thunder softened by rain. "I promise not to protect you from your strength," she said, "but to protect the world from ever forgetting it. I promise not to fight for you, but to fight with you. I promise to never silence your voice and never stop learning your language. And when the world forgets who we were, Omega, blind, broken, cast out, I will remind them that we changed everything." Tears slid down cheeks all around them. Even Magnus, Alpha King of the North, stood tall and weeping. Because this wasn't just a mating, it was a reckoning. When the elder pronounced them mated, there was no dramatic kiss, no choreographed display. Adrian simply leaned forward and pressed his forehead to Elena's. And in the space between breath and skin, he whispered, "Mine." She whispered back, "Always." Then she tapped once against his chest, right over his heart. "I see you." And he tapped back, "You saved me." The celebration echoed through the courtyard long into the night. Lanterns hung from every tree. Omegas danced beside nobles. Betas sang with guards. Rank no longer separated joy. Elena stood at the edge of the balcony, barefoot, looking down at it all. Adrian joined her, steps sure, hands sliding gently into hers. "They're not looking at us like we're strange," he said. "No," she whispered. "They're looking at us like we're proof." He tilted his head. "Proof? That things can change." He smiled. "Is it enough?" Elena turned to him fully. "No," she said, "but it's a beginning." Weeks passed, and change took root like wildfire. Elena was named advocate of the Moonstone Council. A new seat formed to represent Omegas, the disabled, the dismissed. She listened, she spoke. She remembered every voice that had ever been silenced. And when she walked into the chamber, no one looked down anymore. Adrian taught classes on memory mapping, on silent navigation, on how to build systems for those who saw the world differently. He didn't hide his cane, didn't lower his voice. Even the warriors asked him questions now, Captain Thorne ran sign language lessons weekly. The same wolves who once ignored Adrian now lined up to learn how to speak with their hands. And Magnus, he attended every class. One night, as stars wheeled over their private chambers, Elena rested her head on Adrian's chest. They didn't speak for a long time. They didn't need to. Then, softly, Adrian tapped her palm. "Do you regret any of it?" She shook her head, then tapped back. "Not even the pain." He smiled. "You gave me more than love, Elena. You gave me my life." "You gave me my worth," she said. "I thought I was nothing, just ashes and silence." "You were fire," he whispered. "Always." They stood again at the balcony, months after the ceremony. Below them, the courtyard glowed. Wolves of every kind mingled freely. There were no noble-only dances, no Omega-only tables, a world reborn. Elena leaned into his shoulder. "We're not done, are we?" she asked. "No," Adrian said, "but we're finally not doing it alone." As the night deepened, Elena tapped once more over his heart. "I love you." Adrian tapped back. "I hear you, always." And beneath a sky older than memory, a prince who once saw nothing and a girl who'd once been invisible held each other. Two souls the world had tried to erase. Two hearts the moon goddess refused to forget. And together, they wrote the new story.